Winston Churchill once said, "To improve is to change, to be perfect is to change often." If I'm looking at FiiO as a brand, then I'm very happy to see them change in the direction that the community dictates and not their audio engineers. The change from their K19 to K17 was substantial. No THX, AAA circuitry, and all of that replaced with a classic transistor sound biased into Class AB operation, pulling power from a linear transformer. Flagship grade ESS Sabre DAC chips were replaced with flagship grade AKM silicon, and from a somewhat clinical sounding K19 we arrived at something truly special. The K17, I believe, was, and it still is, their very best all-in-one unit, but at $999 not a lot of folks could afford it, and this is where the K15 is coming to save the day with its $599 asking price. So grab yourself a snack and a drink and let's go ahead with this review. The good part is that we're dealing with the same case, with the same retro look combined with the modern technology of the K17. The case work is of course identical and the build quality is as impressive as it was before on K17. FiiO swapped just the linear transformer found on K17 with a 30-watt switching mode power supply on the K15 that provides a little bit less power to the power transistors, meaning that the case is ever so slightly cooler. After 12 hours of non-stop music playback, I measured a case temperature on the hottest spot of 41.5 degrees Celsius or 106.7 degrees Fahrenheit for my friends across the ocean. We have lots of ventilation holes on the K15, on top, on the bottom, to its sides, and since it's not generating as much heat, it barely gets warm. The same protection systems found on K17 were of course integrated into the K15, such over voltage, over current and temperature protection, including overload protection that will save your precious headphones in case of a hardware malfunction. The 3.93-inch colorful touchscreen remained unchanged, and we again have USB Type-C connections on its front and back panels. The only physical difference I see is that you can power the K15 with the internal power supply or with an external 12 volt and 2.5 amperes power supply like their PL50, just in case you want to experiment. In terms of connectivity, we get pretty much every digital input except for BNC and AAC. We even have an Ethernet input to use it as a room endpoint or as an AirPlay enabled unit. And the USB Type-A port lets you connect a USB flash drive or an external SSD for offline music playback. The K15 is not just a DAC and headphone amplifier. You can use it as a DAC and preamp, and you can lock the voltage output when used in line-out mode. It's quite versatile if you ask me. Since we have a 3.93-inch touchscreen, its UI is quite straightforward. A simple swipe to the right will reveal almost every single feature. We have a couple of digital filters to choose from, several EQ options, and even 10 custom EQ presets that can be saved on your PC and then loaded into the K15. You can even enable the driverless USB 1.0 protocol, allowing you to connect it to your favorite gaming console via USB and enjoy gaming with a much higher quality sound. A swipe to the left lets you select a desired input, and everything else is controlled by the analog switches and knobs you can see on the front plate. We also have a plasticky remote control with rubberized buttons. You can change the working mode, you have the volume, play, pause, next previews, and of course you can power on or power off the unit with this remote. Under its hood is where most of the changes were made to hit a more affordable price point. For example, we no longer have that flagship grade AKM AK4499EX, but a slightly cheaper variant AK4497SV, but mind you, its dynamic range and harmonic distortion is actually very similar. We have two DAC chips working in stereo mode, so yes, this is a fully balanced unit. The voltage amplification duties are made by a couple of op amps, But more importantly, we have 8 transistors biased into class AB operation working as power amplifiers for your headphones. Since the 35-watt linear power supply of the K15 is no more and we now have a slightly weaker 30-watt switching mode power supply and less power is going to the power transistors, it's normal that the power output is slightly lower. So from 4 watts we now have 3 watts on this one, but please don't worry, it's plenty powerful, and more about that in a minute. We again have 3 separated boards, the analog section, digital section, power supply for a slightly lower channel crosstalk. Last but not least, high quality capacitors have been used all around at the regulation stage, current buffer stage and output stage, from Nikicons to Elna Silmic 2, and all of them were designed for audio applications. 2 femtosecond clocks were used for precise timing of 44.1 and 48 kHz PCM content, and if you are into streaming, then K15 can be used wired via Ethernet up to 1 gigabit speeds, or wirelessly since we have a 2.5G and 5G Wi-Fi module. Bluetooth is also a thing, but honestly I do not see a reason to use Bluetooth on this one, since every other digital input sounds considerably better and the streaming part sounds the best to my ears, so please don't use Bluetooth with something like this. There is so much more about the K15, and if you want to learn everything, I will leave a link below just in case you want to check those components or its specs. It's all there, check it out. Since this thing is Roon enabled, I just powered on my Rockna WaveDream.net Roon server in the living room, and I went ahead to my office, I plugged this in and I introduced an Ethernet cable. I opened Roon app on my smartphone, I enabled this one as a Roon endpoint, and voila, just like that I can stream music from Tidal and Qobuz directly to K15. And if you want to know which digital input sounded best to me, then that's easy, that would be Ethernet via Roon. AirPlay also sounded pretty nice to me, but since AirPlay is not 100% lossless, some of the tightness and some of the resolution was lost via AirPlay, but it still sounded 1000 times better compared to Bluetooth. Streaming music via AirPlay is of course so much easier, since you no longer need to buy a Roon server and install it somewhere around your house. You just fire up your favorite music streaming software on your iOS device, select K15 via AirPlay and start streaming music to it. These 2 features were implemented very well, and in both cases the sound was just outstanding, especially via Roon. I'm only a bit sad that we do not get a direct Tidal Connect, Spotify Connect and Qobuz Connect option on this one, as not all of us are using iPhones and Roon servers, and so far this is the only thing I can complain about this one. But don't worry, if streaming is not so important to you, then you can of course use any of its digital inputs. I used USB for a couple of times with my PC, and after installing its drivers and selecting it as the main output device, I was able to use Tidal and Qobuz installed on my PC. I watched a few videos on YouTube and I gamed for an hour or two, and all of these cases the K15 performed as expected. Alright everyone, now let's discuss its sound. Soundstage, dynamics, transient response, resolution, all of the good stuff, because most of you, if not all of you, came specifically for this. Now, if you already watched my K17 video, then you should know that K15 has exactly the same tonality and the same frequency response. And this is a very big thing, because K17 was a monumental step up, a big change compared to anything that FiiO has done up to that point. I was discussing with one of my friends about a very interesting topic, how we humans, or more exactly audiophiles or music lovers, perceive as natural or organic or lifelike sounding. And he said something interesting to me. Since we are social beings and we like to meet and talk with each other, the most important part of audio reproduction of any audio device is how the voices are rendered. If they sound exactly as they do in real life, or very close to real life, then everything else doesn't matter as much, because the job of a DAC amp or just of a DAC is to sound as real as possible. FiiO will soon release what I believe would be their most lifelike, their most natural sounding unit to date. It's an R2R ladder DAC together with a tube buffer stage, and it's called Warmer. Although this one is not an R2R ladder DAC, nor does it have a tube buffer stage, there is something going on with the vocal performance on this one, because that AKM silicon together with Velvet Sound Technology 2.0 and also those 8 transistors biased into Class A operation replicate well the sound I hear at live jazz concerts. The vocals on K15 have an emotional depth. For example, when I'm listening to Louis Armstrong or Tom Waits or Ray Charles, you can feel their vocal cords vibrating. There is a powerful dragged across gravel vocal qualities to these guys, which contributes to what I call a natural mid-range rendition. There is an ever so slightly sweetness and warmth to the sound that was not present on the K19, and I'm very happy that FiiO management chose to have a very different sound starting with the K17, and now we have it on K15. I won't call it syrupy, because it's not that milk with honey sound that I'm usually getting with R2R creations connected to some huge tube amplifiers, but there is some of that flavor on the K15 that does full justice to the music. My grandfather once told me that there are 2 types of music: music for your feet and music for your brain. I was a kid back then and I couldn't understand him, but right now this saying hits so differently, so hard actually. And I'm very happy that he taught me to listen to music for my brain and how to appreciate music, and I'd say that K15 is connecting me to the music like an invisible umbilical cord. Instead of putting 2 or 3 gain settings on this one like most DAC amp combos do, we have 5 gain settings on K15 and also K17. However, you should know that super high and ultra high gain settings were mostly reserved for super hard to drive headphones, so you'll rarely use such gain position with regular planars or dynamic headphones. We now have only 3 watts per channel on K15 as opposed to 4 watts on K17 or 8 watts on K19. However, don't forget that we have 8 transistors biased into Class A operation, and we have that classic transistor sound that is delivering strong dynamics, very good low-end delivery, and most importantly, a very good grip over your headphone drivers. And sometimes there's a feeling I'm listening to music and I feel that maybe FiiO engineers didn't measure this one right, because it feels like it has more power on top. For example, the Headphone HE1000 unveiled I reviewed just a couple of days ago didn't need super high or ultra high gain settings to sound at their best. However, for the sake of it, I tried them on the ultra high gain settings, and the highest volume I could reach for just a couple of seconds to preserve my hearing was 55 out of 100 steps available. So clearly we have more than enough power on this one, and I presume that 90% of the headphones available right now on the market won't reach 60 volume position on this one without drilling a hole in your eardrums. The only headphones from my stable that needed a little bit more than that were T+A Solid RP, HD800S by Sennheiser, and also Susvara OG and Susvara Unveiled. For these last 2 headphones, I reached around 90, maybe 95 to volume position. The point where they sounded quite good, but not what I would call outstanding. So if you want something that sounds legendary, very good, I would not use K15 for super hard to drive loads like the Susvaras. To be frank, I couldn't tell that there is less power on this one compared to K17. There was maybe 1 click or 2 clicks difference, so what was 55 on K17 was maybe 56 or 57 on this one. So power-wise, these two are very close to each other. The important part is that it was easily driving all of my headphones in my stable, the sound was tight and amplifier was in control all of the times. Dynamics weren't slowing down, nor did I feel that its tonality moves from natural to harsh when reaching upper power limits. The Susvara sounded good, but not really outstanding, and I would advise getting at least a topping A900 for them, or better yet, a powerful, fully discrete amplifier that provides you at least twice the power of K15. Dynamics are overall very good on the K15, and I'd say it's even more impressive compared to K19. And as long as you are not using some super hard to drive headphones like HE6, the Susvaras, ABs 1266, DCS Stealth, Expanse, Modhouse Tungstens, then you'll be safe and dynamics won't let you down. Transistor-based amplifiers like this have a somewhat stronger force when pushing the bass notes, and you'll get a similar feeling with the K15. The only small downgrade I feel there is on K15 compared to K17 and K19 is the overall resolution and detail retrieval. So what was 100% on K19 was more like 96 on K17 and 94 on this one, but there's still plenty of information floating around, but not as much to be overbearing or fatiguing. Perhaps a more important change when I moved from K19 to K17 and now to K15 was the perceived sharpness, leading edge, and contour of the notes. K19 was overdoing it at times, and I could hardly relax my brain. It was always drawing my full attention to those small things happening in the background. It was outstanding when playing competitive first-person shooter games and you can hear your enemies from afar, but when listening to music it was overdoing it. It was a bit clinical in a way, something that is not present on either K17 or K15. Competitive gaming is indeed better on the K19, and if you want to hear everything without a filter applied to your games, music or movies, then K19 is reigning supreme. But if you want to detach yourself and have a strong connection with your music, then K17 and K15 are doing it much better. The noise floor was never a concern on modern FiiO devices, especially the ones released in the last 3 years or so. These guys are also making a ton of IAMs of different kinds, and it would make no sense to have a noisy performance with your portable or desktop devices. But regardless, I wanted to know how a few IAMs sound with the K15, so I used two pairs, the FA19 and also my personal favorite, the FX17, with that 4.4mm jack on its balanced output, and as long as I stayed on its low, medium or high gain settings, I couldn't hear any noise passing through, regardless if it was the lowest or the highest volume position. It was simply pitch black and I could listen all day long with my IAMs. It was just super clean. On the super high and ultra high gain settings, yes, there is a little bit of noise floor, but you know, that was created for super hard to drive headphones, definitely not for IAMs. So I'd say this is a very IAM friendly amplifier if you remain on the low, medium and high gain settings. There are several ways to improve the soundstage a DAC or an amplifier produces. For example, you can have separated boards for the analog section, digital section, power supply. It's exactly what we have here for a lower channel crosstalk. You can use 2 DAC chips, or better yet 4 DAC chips for a lower crosstalk. We have 2 DAC chips in here. You can have a fully balanced amplifier stage for even a lower channel crosstalk. Again, we have that in here. And there are many other ways to improve the soundstage a DAC or amplifier produces, but usually you need a much bigger case. And when you have a bigger case and a lot more electronics, usually the price goes up considerably, something that FiiO didn't want to do with the K15. Nonetheless, for this price and for this size, I believe that K15 sounds quite spacious. The soundstage is pretty impressive, and it doesn't matter if it's a pair of IAMs, open back headphones, closed back headphones, or some loudspeakers. It never sounded closed in and personal. And it can get like that only when the music was recorded in such a way. Other than that, FiiO could portray a big or a small room, and it still gets an 8 out of 10 from me in this regard. At $599 US, to be frank, there aren't so many competitors in this price category, especially if you consider the streaming part. DNA Alpha Pro is by $100 more expensive. It's also more powerful, has better dynamics, and it's more resolving sounding on the micro scale at the cost of not being as organic and smooth, while dropping the touchscreen and the streaming part altogether. The Aoun S9C is also a strong contender at $799 US, having a similar tone and timbre to the K19 and a similar technical performance with the DNA Alpha Pro at the cost of not having a touchscreen and streaming options like K15 does. At exactly $599 US, K15 right now doesn't have a real competitor, so it's ruling supreme with a very good feature set and a sound that is both clear, natural and lifelike. FiiO Control app wasn't updated yet to support the K15, and that is one of the drawbacks I have with this one, so I couldn't play with that, but I'm told a new update is coming soon and you'll be able to control every feature available on this one with your smartphone, something that pricier devices I just mentioned can't do. It easily drove most of my headphones and it was dead silent with my IAMs at the right gain positions, and considering all of the above, I will recommend the K15 to you. Alright everyone, thank you for watching. Please consider liking, disliking, maybe subscribing to this channel if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you soon with a Gustard DAC review that many of you are waiting for a very long time. It should be ready in about a week, so please stay tuned for that.